Okay, so today we are going to start a new chapter, chapter 12, which is going to be about imperialism or new imperialism, as it is oftentimes called. Um, and just kind of as a starting point to this entire discussion, we're going to try and remember back that during the period of the age of exploration, that the Europeans went around and conquered a lot of land, especially in the Americas, of course. Our country was conquered during that period by the Spanish, and then eventually the English and the French, and even the Dutch got in on that. But also the Europeans had set up trading posts in Africa. They had set up trading posts in India and in Southeast Asia, and they held on to them. These trading posts were like little cities. The European ships could show up, drop off their stuff, they would trade with the local people, and bring back stuff that they had gotten from the local people. So here we sit, 300 years after the conquer and eventual colonization. The colonization took 100 years at least of the Americas, and setting up all the trading posts along in Africa and Southeast Asia. And we're going to find that the Europeans decide, hey, we actually should take those countries. We should not just have little trading posts in those countries. We should take them. We're also going to find that many Latin American countries start to pull back and get away from European control. So now we're going to pick things up. We remember in our studies that the Industrial Revolution had just begun mid-1700s. European countries were manufacturing goods. And one of the things that they found was that they needed natural resources. They needed raw materials for the Industrial Revolution. They needed coal and oil, which would be used to power the machinery of the Industrial Revolution. And they also needed wood, rubber, which actually comes from a tree, is an interesting fact, and other raw materials for making stuff that they were making during this Industrial Revolution. And they looked around and said, hey, Africa, Southeast and South Asia have a lot of natural resources. They also have a lot of people that we could sell our stuff to. And we learned that in the 1700s, the French and the English fight for control over India. The English win. Okay. So one thing, and I want to start here. One thing that we need to know is that, and I mentioned this when we studied the Industrial Revolution, is that the countries that industrialized first became the richest countries in the world. They actually are still mostly the richest countries in the world, minus some oil-producing countries, and maybe a few banking nations. So these countries would also be leaders in imperialism. England, France, the United States needed raw materials, eventually Germany, for the Industrial Revolution. And we're going to find that they are the leaders in this period, period of imperialism. They're the countries that take over the most land. And really, what ends up happening is that most of the world will be taken over by Europeans. That all of Africa, except for two small countries, Libya, Ethiopia, and Eritrea, and Liberia over here, will be taken over by Europeans. That China, although not taken over, will be divided up in terms of zones of influence by the Europeans. And that the Middle East really is one of the only areas that is not. taken over by the Europeans in this period. And we also said that the Latin Americans are going to push the Europeans out and gain independence during this period. We'll find out largely because the United States supported Latin American countries having independence. So the United States could become more influential in those areas. But we'll get there. This is just a quick look at what the world looked like during this period and which areas were not being controlled by Europeans. Today, we know that the richer countries in the world were leaders in imperialism. The dark blue is the richest or richer countries in the world. They're also NATO. This map shows some of the NATO countries, but the richer countries in the world today were also the countries that were taking over a lot of land. So I mentioned earlier that the Industrial Revolution is really one of the main reasons why this imperialism starts in the first place, the need for raw materials, the need for people to buy their goods that they had made back in their European countries. And a quick definition again. I don't know if this date 1880 is perfectly correct. That may be what is considered the scramble for Africa, but we're going to find out that as early as 1820, European countries were taking over Southeast Asia. So why? And the first answer is money, right? Money is oftentimes the answer to a lot of these type of questions. Yeah, this was a race for who could become the richer countries. Money equals power, and the more countries you took over, the more free raw materials you could get, the more people you had to buy your stuff, the richer you would get. So money is probably the main answer. It was also a matter of power or prestige. The more colonies you had, the better you looked in the 1800s, late 1800s in Europe. There was also this idea of social Darwinism, which I mentioned towards the end of last semester. This idea that it's natural for the richer countries to take over the poorer countries, that this is just the way things work. There was also a desire to spread Christianity. I mentioned in the past that Christians were always kind of looking to spread due to what happened in the Middle Ages when the Islamic Empire came in and took over and was much more powerful than them. There was this idea that the more Christians, the better, if there's ever going to be another religious war. And then lastly, there was this concept that was being spread around Europe that it was, well, there was a book called The White Man's Burden that came out in this period. And basically, it wasn't just the book, but the book explains this idea that Europeans felt that it was their duty to teach the less advanced parts of the world, that it was their duty to educate the less advanced parts of the world. And oftentimes they would use very inflammatory language, that they had to civilize the savages, or it was so hard on them having to go and take over other countries and take their stuff, their raw materials. But this was also part of it. This was a period when there was a belief amongst some Europeans that Europeans were just better, which of course we know is not true. Our book's going to call this racism. Yeah, that's what they call it.